you ever feel like some characters added to Smash are just Nintendo psyops? Bayonetta proved that the Wii U is totally mature and not just for kids. Fire Emblem gets their flavor of the month to promote a new game. Sorry, Roy, that includes you too. And then there's Min Min, not even the character on the box art of one of her own titles. That surprisingly sold more than Xenoblade 2 and Mario Soccer, by the way, but hasn't really been relevant since the first year the Switch came out. Yet in Smash Ultimate, I'd argue she's the most relevant she's ever been. So today, we'll be looking at how this character went from a polarizing counterpick character to one of the best in today's metagame. Thank you to G Fuel, who has paid to be mentioned in today's video. G Fuel keeps sending me things and I'm running out of space in my pantry. This month they're... Thank you to G Fuel, who has paid to be mentioned in today's video. G Fuel keeps sending me things and I'm running out of space in my pantry. This month they're... What the fuck? Oh, it's Glitch Month. For the Buy More Save More sale from November 24th to 27th, you can find discounts on all sorts of flavors. These actually do taste really good, and I appreciate that G Fuel offers options for non-caffeinated mixes. I've been enjoying the Hydration Plus Focus bundle after my long workouts. They're usually running a pretty solid sale like the ones I just mentioned, but even if you miss those, you can use my discount code WALT at checkout or go to gfuel.com/WALT to get 20% off your order as well. Full transparency, any purchase you make with my link gives me a small commission, and that also helps me stay partnered with them, so thanks. Thanks again to G Fuel for supporting me and the channel, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. When it was announced that an ARMS character would be kicking off Fighters Pass 2, there was pretty reasonable worry on how that kind of gameplay would transfer over, and those worries would come into fruition. Min Min's attacks can cover an insane amount of space, dethroning Byleth as the Distance Demon, a mere one character released later. Coming from the game ARMS, where you control two arms with different controllers, it would make sense that each arm is controlled through separate inputs. Her attack button arm is always a dragon, which can get extra distance on her attacks by shooting a laser if you choose to press the button again in her smash attack. And her special button arm can be swapped out for other variations. Outside of the dragon is the Ram Ram and the Megawatt. Ram Ram shoots out this fuck-ass angle at a quick speed that is great for catching recoveries and setting up combos at the exchange of low damage. Megawatt is the opposite, slow but has strong priority against other attacks and hits incredibly hard. All of her horizontal-based inputs utilize her arm shots in some sort of way, and both arms can follow up the other with different timings, making her a tricky character to deal with. She can even shoot arms in two different directions while standing still. Like ARMS the game, if she successfully throws an opponent, her dragon arm gets a buff, hitting harder and shooting a more powerful laser. Her vertical moves are predominantly formed by kicks, which is kind of weird, I guess, but in her home series, she has a special kick ability that can knock down your opponent's arms. So naturally, in Smash, they made her up smash a reflector. This is a surprise tool we'll showcase later. But with these strengths of distance and mix-up, Min Min always felt a bit polarizing due to some pretty glaring weaknesses. For one, she has a tether recovery with, ironically, not a lot of range, so she always felt vulnerable off stage, even if she can cover in front of her with her arms. Second, she doesn't have the quickest get-off-me or anti-air tools, which also makes sense. Fast characters can be a bit scary to deal with if they take the advantage first in a game. However, like most other Fighters Pass 2 characters, she was released during the pandemic, meaning she only saw online play for a while. And she was a menace online, becoming one of the most hated characters in Japan's online scene until she finally saw a patch that toned her down. Once we got offline, the character didn't really see widespread results. But one top player in particular picked her up to showcase the potential she had to be a threat in this meta. In the beginning of Ultimate's life, ProtoBanham was one of the up-and-coming talents from Japan. His Lucina was absolutely surgical, and strong early major performances at Umebura SP4, Umebura Japan Major, and even a top 8 finish at EVO showcased he had what it took to become one of the best. But I would argue he was maybe a step behind some of the other top Japanese players of the time like Zachary, Shuton, Kameme, and T. Unable to claim those major wins, but always getting close. However, over the pandemic, many players had the opportunity to try new characters, and Lucina's plain foundation was starting to show some cracks in the meta. He needed another character to close up those gaps, so he started experimenting with Min Min. Proto had a honestly rare opportunity to play offline at the end of 2020, and he won a regional event with solo Min Min. Truth be told, he was the best player there by a country mile, but that success there bolstered him to stick with the character. And the official return date would be June 26, 2021, where Proto would make his grand return to offline competition at Kaguribi 4. Kaguribi already had a bit of a weird start. Despite Proto's success in 2019, he was seeded at 25th due to missing some of the events Japan had already held prior. Plus, competition over the pandemic for Japan had leveled up pretty significantly due to the popularity of their online ladder, Smashmade. And that improvement definitely showed, as Proto's bracket was no mere cakewalk. That didn't mean Proto didn't improve too, though. He took down some of Japan's best, such as Shuton, Yoshidora, prior Kaguribi champion T, and their best player in a Game 5 set, Zachary, to make it into Grand Finals. And it was a pretty healthy mix of both Lucina and Min against the top echelon. Lucina for close-range fundies, and Min for longer-range fundies, I guess. I don't know. Returning to Grands, though, was Zachary, a player who was the character counterpicker back in the day. Proto was able to find victory with solo Lucina earlier in the bracket, but apparently stood no chance in the rematch, going down 0-2 in Grand Finals. So why not give the Min a shot? And yeah, the switch worked wonders. He 2-stocked Zachary and then switched back to Lucina. Why would he do that? He was just completely destroying Zachary. Well, it turns out ProtoBanham was developing a strategy that would define some of his best events later down the road. With both of his characters playing so differently, Lucina for close-range fundies and Min for long-range fundies, he would swap between them each game in a set to make sure his opponents never have time to figure out each matchup. It would essentially give his opponent this severe whiplash of having to play completely different fundamental neutral games. Even though he lost the first set of Grands to Zachary, his Min was fresh for the reset. Zachary saw the writing on the wall. He guessed that Proto would go Min and chose the character he had with a better matchup into that character. It wouldn't matter. ProtoBanham got a 2-stock on Zachary in Game 1 of the reset, and while it looked like Zachary was maybe figuring things out in Game 2, Proto would come back and win the 3rd and 4th game to seal the deal. So right after winning his first major in Smash Ultimate, something completely unprecedented happened. He kept winning, and winning, and winning. We wouldn't see ProtoBanham compete again until October 2021, but spoiler alert, he would win another major, Seibugeki 8, this time primarily with Min. Then, 2 weeks later, he'd win Meisuma Top 6. He'd fail to win Kaguribi 5, though that's a story we'll leave for another day, but would essentially stand as the best player Japan had to offer. He won Eastern Powerhouse Invitational 2 towards the end of that year, and then won most of the majors in his homeland once competition started back up. After conquering Japan, it felt like there was only one place left to showcase his talents, the United States. So, at the end of 2021, ProtoBanham had the opportunity to test his new Min at the Smash World Tour Championships. And unfortunately for him, his dominance didn't really translate over. He'd land himself at 7th place, losing to Dabuz and Cola. From there, Proto's grip on potentially reaching the very top echelon of Smash started to slip away. At the beginning of 2022, he would struggle to maintain his gold medal streak, losing once again to Zachary, who developed a Sheik specifically for Proto's Min. He'd have inconsistent results at majors and regionals in Japan, but his next travel overseas to Smash Ultimate Summit 4 showed a bit more promise. Sure, he struggled to make waves during the round-robin brackets, but went on a monstrous losers run to 3rd place in the finals bracket, even beating top players like Tweak and even the incredibly dominant MK Leo, who could not seem to get a handle on Proto's character swap tactic. But the first places that he was getting all through 2021 just kept eluding him. After that Eastern Powerhouse Invitational 2 win in November of 2021, it wouldn't be until July of 2022 at Seibugeki 11 where Proto would finally find another gold medal. And the following week, he was planning on going back to the States to enter one of the biggest brackets of the year. Double Down was one of the biggest stops on the Smash World Tour circuit in 2022. With over 800 entrants, Proto and a few other Japanese competitors flew out to Vegas to bet big on circuit points. For Proto, this was an opportunity to finally claim a win on US soil. You see, while Top Japan was adapting to Min, NA's top Min were relatively inactive, and nowhere near as good as ProtoBanham. There was pretty much undeniably a gap in matchup knowledge, and it definitely showed. Before making top 8, Proto only dropped a singular game. He would dominate over fellow Japanese player Ken 3-1 and meet MK Leo in winners finals. And like I alluded to earlier, Leo had a troubled past few months against Min. He took his first set loss ever to Dabuz at Low Tide City, he found himself going to Game 5 with others like Pinkfresh, and of course he lost to ProtoBanham earlier this year. After a number of these close calls, Leo naturally started developing a counterpick specifically for Min Min, which was Corrin. And we have another whole video on that, which is, go watch it. But Corrin's disjoints, turns out, are pretty good at beating Min Min's arms, and they have a strong juggle game to keep Min Min stuck in disadvantage. It would work against Proto, but his Lucina in Game 1, and it was just not ready for the Min Min, getting swept 3 games in a row. Leo would make it back to Grand Finals to face ProtoBanham once more, but this time would surprise everyone with a character we have never seen before from him. MK Leo's Rob was maybe the oddest version of this character you will ever see. No cheese kill confirms, no super crazy item play, just neutral, and really, really good neutral at that. It broke through Proto's Min Min and even his switch-up strategy against Lucina, and it was looking like Proto's US gold medal was once again going to be stolen from him. He'd completely stopped going Lucina this time in the reset and trusted that he could adapt with Min Min for the rest of the set. He got a strong 2-stock in Game 1, holding Leo in disadvantage on the left side of the stage with 0 answer back. Leo almost made the comeback in Game 2, but an insanely fast mash-out out of grab would let ProtoBanham scrape by. But Leo is Leo. He adapts hard. And now it's Game 4, and Game 4 Leo is not just a title of myth, but a statistical fact. I should know, I did an entire documentary on this with PG Stats, the now defunct PG Stats, but whatever. Proto takes some time to cool off and adjust. He comes out swinging in Game 4, keeping Leo stuck on the left side of the stage once again, and we see rare footage of Rob getting edgeguarded, even running out of fuel for his up special. From there, the momentum just kept on rolling. By the time Leo lost his second stock, Proto was still at 3. By the time Leo could get his first stock, he was already at 88% on his last. Suffice it to say, it was pretty much over, as ProtoBanham sealed the deal with a megawatt Nair, taking his first gold medal on US soil. That win was the confidence ProtoBanham needed to remain consistent, placing no lower than 7th at the next few events. He'd get another chance to compete overseas at Smash Ultimate Summit 5 just 2 months later, and his Min Min was once again a blight on the US's ability to compete. With his switch-up strategy between his 2 main characters, players never really got comfortable figuring him out, leading to wins over top players like Riddles, Spargo, and finally getting revenge over Cola. He would get 3-0'd by Light in the first set of Grands, and would step away from the setup before the reset for a really, really long time. Unbeknownst to the players, commentators, and spectators, this ice out would be the unfortunate sign of the end of Proto's competitive career. You see, Proto had some health issues that kept him from competing as they flared up in stressful scenarios. While he ended up coming back and defeating Light 3-1 after settling down, this would be ProtoBanham's last major title, solemnly competing in 2023 and just straight up retiring from competition afterwards. Despite these issues though, ProtoBanham will always be seen as one of the greats in Ultimate's competitive lifespan. But with his retirement, a bit of a gap was formed. Min Min no longer had a top representative. And with how much success he saw with the character, many other Min Mins started to pop up and showcase that it may not just be a gimmick. In 2022, the only other Min Min putting up notable results was longtime Smash veteran Pink Fresh, making the top 100 during summer rankings, but once he started slowing down in 2023, a new crop of Japanese players started to take up the mantle. Omawatsu found various major top 8 placements and wins across upper echelon Japanese players like Mia, Hurt, and Neo. And Oi George was the first solo Min Min to make top 100 with his 8 banned Smashmates accounts for smurfing. But towards the middle of 2023, ProtoBanham would pass the torch to the next Min Min, the one who would push the character as far as it could possibly go. At just 14 years old, Doramigi is the definition of young Smash prodigy. He started competing in 2022, but it wouldn't be until 2023 where he started to put his name on the map. Now, Doramigi would find solid regional performances, but really started to turn heads during Golden Week, where he upset Dabuz at Meisuma Top 12. A big upset like that can give any player the confidence to beat anyone, and at the next Meisuma Top, Doramigi decided to do just that 4 times. He'd get a Game 5 win over T and would come across the man himself, ProtoBanham. At one of Proto's last events before his retirement, the two would come face to face in what felt like a passing of the torch moment. And the difference in what Doramigi brought to this character became immediately clear. Doramigi fights. He does not run, he does not camp, he wants you to lose your stocks or he will die trying. To me, his playstyle felt a bit more representative of a tank in a hero shooter. He's just not using his arms to keep you away, but rather continuously takes space on the stage until his opponent has none left. You can see this clear as day, going deep off stage to pressure Proto's recovery, and he relinquishes the Min Min in game 1. Proto switches it off to Lucina, but could not find the answers he needed. So, in game 3, it's back to the mirror match. But Doramigi's offense was just too relenting, too overwhelming, and honestly too weird. On the final stock, the torch was passed. After that, Doramigi would burn past Yoshidora, but lost to Game & Watch player Mia in winners. Then he'd find another amazing top player win and give probably the best pop-off of the year, and after all that, he still fell to one of Japan's new top dogs once more, losing to Mia for a second place finish. With this peak performance and overall consistent showings for the rest of the year, Doramigi would debut on the global rankings at number 43 in the mid-year 2023 season. By the end of that year, he became a pretty consistent threat in Japanese majors and would jump up to 41. And like I said before, Proto would not make eligibility this year due to his low attendance, meaning Doramigi was now the face of Min Min. And in 2024, he would strive to take up that mantle to match his predecessor. The first half of the year would essentially mark the rise of Doramigi as a true threat in the meta. He would start his season off top-8ing 2 of Japan's biggest events of the year, Umebura SP10 and Kowloon 9, adding more international top 20 wins like Zamba and Gluttony, and then in March he'd get his first debut overseas at Battle of BC6. Over there, he'd overcome even more top 100 players who were even playing tough matchups for Min Min, like Monty's Mr. Game & Watch and Base Mage's Jigglypuff. And then he would beat another past major winner, Riddles, ending his run at 4th, losing only to Japanese players. Despite all of these achievements, as the season went by and his consistent top marks improved, Doramigi still struggled to get close to that breakout run with a silver medal. His improvement was still very noticeable, and he was closing in on filing as the Min Min, even doing it completely solo. And his first major win wasn't really looking like an if anymore, but a when. With more of the best in the world starting to be filled in by Japan, specifically from the Kansai precinct, Sumobatos started to get recognition as major events. Doramigi was able to get monthly opportunities to compete against some of the best in the world, like Mia, Raru, Snow, Yoshidora, and even occasionally the number 1 player in the world, Akola. And while Akola and Mia were the usual suspects to win, this event in particular went down a bit differently. Akola was absent from Sumobato SP49, and Mia somehow fell out of the tournament at 13th, losing very early on to a Falco named Kashiya, and then getting eliminated by Snow in losers. Mia was one of Doramigi's biggest bracket demons, with still to this day 0 answers on how to beat his Game & Watch. But now, the door was seemingly wide open. Doramigi would have a relatively clean run to top 8, and would run into one of Japan's best Yoshi players, Ron, in winners semis, but it would be a quick 3-1 victory. But standing in winners finals was a player who was arguably Doramigi's biggest rival at the time, Raru. And look, you would think that Luigi would be a really bad matchup against a character like Min Min, and we've talked about this in another video. He's got slow airspeed, general floatiness, and linear recovery against a character with really long arms, but Raru ended up holding a 4-3 lifetime record over Doramigi. Raru can use things like Zair and Cyclone to beat out the arms, and if he ever got in, he could keep Min Min in the vortex due to her general lack of burst options, especially above her. Best case scenario, he could just kill her at 0, like Luigi does in every matchup, but I digress. This set ended up going the distance, with Doramigi taking the win in Game 5 to make it into Grand Finals. But with a now 4-4 tied set record, all of the cards were on the table when Raru made it back for the run back in Grands. And if there was one advantage Raru had on the table going into this Grand Final set, it was the mental stack. You see, 2 months prior to this event, Raru won his first major. He doesn't have the same mental pressure of needing to take the gold medal for the first time because he's already done it. And sure, he may only have won, but the nerves to do something again are arguably much less than accomplishing it for the very first time. Doramigi was going to absolutely have to earn his first major win in likely another grueling back and forth set. The first game would go Doramigi's way by virtue of finding pretty brutal edgeguards against Raru for the entire game, making him lose stocks below 50%. Game 2, even worse. Doramigi was running a clinic. He 3-stocked Raru in 1.5 minutes. But somehow the momentum reversed in Game 3, with Raru rushing Doramigi down, finding his kill confirms, and even getting a 0 to death. Doramigi would try to slow the tempo by choosing a larger stage for Game 4, but that wasn't enough either. The reverse 3-0 was honestly looking likely, and if Doramigi got reset, he likely was not going to have the mental fortitude to win the second set with how things were going. And Game 5 just contributed to the narrative even more, as Doramigi started with an immediate disadvantage, 0 to death in 10 seconds. By the time Doramigi got Raru's first stock, he was already at 73% on his second, leading to an immediate Luigi kill confirm as soon as Raru hit the respawn. Down essentially an entire stock, Doramigi's loss was looking inevitable. Raru had adapted. But then, a back throw and some abuse of Luigi's floatiness keeps him stuck on the left side of the stage, and Doramigi finds an edgeguard to tie the game right back up. The final stock was a scramble to establish a win con. Doramigi gets Luigi off stage, Raru finds a grab on Min. And surprisingly, Doramigi gets his first with a dash attack near the ledge, sending Raru off stage for one final edgeguard. He wins the match and wins his first major title, becoming the youngest player at 14 years old to ever win an official Smash Major in any title. Doramigi would finish his season 2024.2 just outside of the top 10 at number 11 in the world. But what came next for him in 2025 would not just have him surpassing ProtoBanham, but shocking the entire world order of Smash Ultimate. In case it wasn't obvious, Doramigi was a pretty big threat in 2024, but where he struggled a bit was with his consistency. In particular, Doramigi had a pretty big issue against Donkey Kongs like Mild Na-Ho and Kahaku, and he found some pretty weird losses or outside of top 32 finishes at major events. Min always felt like a polarizing character, and even some of the best Min players who were propping up in 2024 all had secondaries. The next best Min players in Japan, Rimu and Mao, played Steve and Roy respectively. Longtime veteran Chag picked up Min as a co-main to his Palutena. The best Min to start propping up in Europe, Pew, still used his former main Ness for some matchups. Despite Doramigi being the best out of all of them, there was an undercurrent of doubt on how far Min as a character could go without some help. But in the 2025 season, Doramigi shut down all of the naysayers. He'd start this season off with unprecedented top marks, finding second place finishes at 3 different major events and even winning his second major ever at Sumabato 54. Add on a 5th place finish at Kowloon 15, and Doramigi was standing as one of the most consistent players of the entire season. But now there's a new issue. He's only been able to prove himself at one series in his home backyard, and that super major win was still eluding him. He failed to win GSM over Lima in Europe, and his last outing in the States was met with double 9th place finishes in Florida. But, almost like fate, he'd head to Las Vegas like Proto did years ago to try one more time. Level Up Expo was the 3rd biggest tournament of the season, and featured a melting pot of North America and Japan's best. This event was a bloodbath of upsets, with top player after top player dropping like flies. Doramigi barely scraped by an upset of his own against a Bayonetta player named Deathspade in a Game 5 set, and would climb his way into winner's side top 8 with a dominant 3-0 over the current title holder of number 1 in the world, Spargo. In top 8 though, he was met with another oddity, a purple Luigi, but not Raru. Instead, it was a notorious US Wi-Fi player going on the Cinderella run of a lifetime, Kiarash. Despite Doramigi's familiarity with the matchup, going against someone who is on fire is always incredibly tough. These two players would trade games all the way to Game 5, where things were starting to look dire for Kiarash, until he hit an insane misfire to tie the game up to a last stock. But, like in all of those Raru sets, Doramigi knew what Luigi wanted, a grab. So he platform camped until he found his opening and sealed the deal. In Winners Finals, that unfamiliarity completely washed away as he was met with a player he already had some history with, Zamba. Now, they only played once over a year ago back in Japan, but now Zamba was playing with the home field advantage. So somehow we're back to Min versus Rob at the top of the Las Vegas major tournament. I feel like I'm in deja vu mode, but as history repeats itself, this set would head to a Game 5, with Min landing a megawatt kill to secure the win. Now in Grand Finals, Doramigi was one set away from winning his first super major event. But meeting him in Grands was not Zamba, not Kiarash, or any of the typical NA killers like Light or Spargo, but instead, Onin. Onin was on an immense losers run of their own, but unfortunately for Onin, Doramigi was one of the worst draws they could have gotten. Doramigi was a menace against Steve, completely chiseled against Akola, even making Akola briefly switch off the character when facing him. Doramigi dominantly took Game 1, but barely clutched out Game 2, and Onin was starting to keep pace, even taking a pretty close Game 3. But, as we said earlier, Doramigi plays and dies by his hyper-aggressive offense. And if he can get the ball rolling, if he takes that space, if he starts mugging you like you owe him money, well, this happens.
One mistake think swinging a little too early cost them potentially everything. What in the hell? The reflect properties of the up smash deleting the absolute shit out of that stock. Oh my goodness.
We had to use one of ours just one time for it because you definitely got to call it out. You got to call it out. Okay.
It's a Sunday, bro. I don't know who he prayed to for that miracle, but it has been answered. Doramigi is your Level Up Expo 2025 champion.
Doramigi absolutely steamrolled his way into winning Level Up Expo, putting him in contention for #1 in the world. And I should add, it's incredibly unprecedented for a player who has never been top 10 in their title to jump up to #1 consideration in any Smash game. 3 Japanese players, Akola, Doramigi, and Hurt, were in a 3-way race for the title at this point. To set the stage, if Doramigi is able to win Kagaribi 13 the following week, the slated biggest Ultimate Tournament of all time, it was 100% his. But unfortunately, not all stories go that way. He'd make top 8 again, but would fall at 5th, losing to Tweak. And Akola would go on to win the tournament. But there was still one more chance. You see, Akola got 33rd at Level Up Expo, which was an incredibly tough underperformance compared to the rest of his season. Doramigi, on the other hand, still hasn't placed below 5th for the entire year, and has at least one win over Akola back at Meisuma Top 1, despite being behind in the head-to-head. If we look at his options, there is one thing Doramigi can do to give himself a shot at best in the world, and that's get a win over Hurt specifically. These two players had still not played in this season, and Hurt was 4-0 over Akola, who was struggling to find a way to beat the Snake Extraordinaire. And it turns out Hurt was registered for a tournament right in Doramigi's home turf, Sumabato SP59. If Doramigi took this event, he would have more major wins than Akola, better wins than Akola, and still better consistency over Akola. For Doramigi, Sumabato SP59 felt like some of his similar prior runs. A close call Game 5 set, this time with the best Piranha Plant player in the world, Tass, and then pretty smooth sailing to top 8. He 3-0'd Yoshidora at the start of Top Cut and would once again find himself in front of a purple Luigi, this time Raru again. But Doramigi was on a mission, and a 3-1 over Raru would put him comfortably in Grand Finals. And by fate's own intervention, just as he needed, meeting him in Grand Finals was none other than the man he needed to face, Hurt. Hurt at this point had carried a 4-3 record over Doramigi, but Doramigi won the last 2 encounters they had. In Game 1, Hurt took the first stock and built up enough damage that he held a pretty significant lead before losing his first. Then Hurt took the second stock from Doramigi with pretty low damage on his own, but Doramigi came off the Angel platform swinging, taking his stock right back without even taking a % of damage. All tied up, and after a ton of scramble, Doramigi would take the final stock. Game 2 would be much closer than the first, if that was even possible. Both players were keeping pace, but Min Min's advantage in this matchup was becoming apparent. She can pressure Snake easily with her range, making grenades tough to use. She can interrupt Nikita when she's offstage at a safe distance, making edgeguarding her a bit tougher than expected, and she can even catch Snake recovering high with an empowered Dragon Arm. Hurt was still keeping up in the scramble, but he was slowly losing his grip as Doramigi grabbed onto Game 2. This was it. Doramigi was one game away from achieving the monumental goal of becoming the best player in the world. But in Game 3, Hurt didn't pick Snake. He chose a character who could potentially be a tough time for Min Min, a fast, in-your-face, but incredibly evasive blue blur, Sonic. This switch admittedly caught Doramigi off guard, making a complete change of plans on the fly to adapt to an entirely new playstyle. But despite changing speeds, the Sonic was outpaced and just not ready yet, as Doramigi would secure one final stock with a dashback forward smash to secure the gold as well as the title of #1 player in the world. In 2025, Min Min is seeing more relevance in the meta than ever before. Doramigi, of course, stands at the top, but he's not the only one. Rimu is still sitting in the top 100 and got 9th at Kagaribi 13. Chag and Pew are starting to put the character on the map in their respective regions, and Dabuz still uses the character on occasion. Even other top players are starting to explore the character's potential, with players like Raru and Kaninabe pulling out the character. Despite initial thoughts on her rather polarizing toolkit, Min Min is 100% here to stay. And as Doramigi has shown, just because you think your character should win against her, doesn't mean in practice you can. And I believe that the youngest #1 player that the Smash series has ever known will continue to be one of Ultimate's top dogs for years to come. Thanks for watching. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Those of you who were on my community tab saw I was entertaining the idea of remerging my Ultimate channel with the main channel here in a quest to broaden my horizons to general Smash storyteller guy. I try to be transparent about how I do these things on my channel, and it seems like you guys appreciate that, so I appreciate you appreciating that. Honestly, I think this is a really good story about a player who absolutely deserves it, regardless of if you like the game or not, and it served as a good way for me to reintroduce a small bit of variety to this channel, but don't worry, I'm still a Melee guy through and through. Anyway, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment so I know we're doing a good job, and thanks to my top patrons and YouTube members who make these videos possible. I essentially reinvest all of my earnings there back into this channel so I can publish as much as I can. If you join at the $5 level, you'll get your name in the credits, and for a little more, I'll say your name, right now. So thanks to Avishua Stein, Bobby Wasabi, Dark Genix, Eric is Cool, Gustavo Cantu Fernandez, James Fadman, Justin Duncan Mills, Kyle Carlin, Marshall Bradley, and Sam Wright.